This is episode 103 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. Last week it was 16 hours. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Let's get into it. This is one of my favorite headlines ever. Fox News is fighting for the war inside Donald J. Trump's mind.
So there you've got the current president, literally 1,000 feet from where we are sitting right now at Van Leeuwen's Ice Cream yesterday. And I would imagine the most exciting thing for him, though, was that free ice cream cone.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad he was answering the questions about the ceasefire, because that's something that we're all concerned with. But he's doing it with an ice cream cone in his hand. I'm glad he addressed it. But do you think Benjamin Netanyahu would be sitting there with an ice cream cone? To our friends in Israel, this is a major deal. So the
president using the moment as an ice cream olive branch to the Muslim community.
Now, the ice cream, you know my rule about men eating soup in public. I think the same thing for ice cream. A grown man, especially the president, should not be licking ice cream. It would make him lick ice cream like that in public to make him look weak and stupid and old.
He only has ice cream in public.
But, you know, in between slurps of his ice cream cone, how much he loves ice cream and how much fun it is. He's a weak child who's got to get ice cream as a prize in order for him to go out. As the world is burning, Joe Biden is licking his ice cream. And
Joe has given you an ice cream headache. Hey.
So the crazy thing about that little montage there is I could have made it much longer. That's just one day. That's one day. One day of them talking about Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, eating an ice cream cone as if it is an absolutely outrageous set of behaviors. Now, mind you, the premise of Joe Biden talking about Gaza, Hamas, Israel, while eating ice cream is, drum roll please, he was standing in an ice cream parlor when he said it. I know, shocking. Shocking. How dare he? He had just done Seth Meyers' show, Late Night with Seth Meyers. I'm not sure the exact name of Seth Meyers' show. I think he's hilarious. But he did his show, and they were in like an ice cream shop that was right next to the studio. Everybody knows Joe Biden loves ice cream. Ronald Reagan loved jelly beans. Get over it. Ronald Reagan loved jelly. I think jelly beans are more infantile than ice cream. Everybody loves ice cream. Jelly beans, I like jelly beans. But jelly beans are something that like truly little kids eat. I'm a weirdo who gets the bags that are all black jelly beans because I adore black licorice. Like the freak show that I am. And I know people hate black licorice. You love it or hate it. That thing is something you love or hate. You love it or hate it. And I will you have to pace yourself because you can actually get sick from eating too much of it. Can hurt your blood pressure, believe it or not. True story. Anyway, but so he's in this ice cream shop. It's like this upscale, expensive ice cream. He's in this ice cream, and they're like, the press, the perfect opportunity. Let's ask about the Israel-Hamas war and a ceasefire negotiation. Is that on the press or is that on Biden? Okay. Anyway, was he supposed to say, "I'm sorry, I'm eating ice cream right now," and that would be undignified for me to answer. Let's create that scenario. Joe Biden, the press asked him about a ceasefire in Gaza, and he says, "I'm sorry, but that would be undignified of me to answer while eating ice cream." And Fox would be like, "Well, we can't criticize him because, it would be." Hell no! They would freak out. And it would be like 3 days of them like repeating him verbatim and going, "How dare he? He should have taken that ice cream, tossed it, thrown it at the clerk who scooped it out, thrown it in his face, tossed it to the ground, stomped on it and said, 'Let me talk about a ceasefire.'" Okay, I'm sorry. They're just... So I had some fun with my lead. Some months it's just like if I can cobble together a paragraph, I'm like, that's whatever. They spend so much time on everything else on the newsletter, but I did have fun with this one. So here we go. Fox News and the shriveled corpse of what is left of the Republican Party have become warriors in battles created by the deluded fantasies of a cognitively impaired racist man-child. If Trump makes up a ridiculous scenario involving plots to fill the United States with deranged violent criminals and hapless mental patients, Fox will dutifully repeat it. One would think that the network might have learned something after it paid out $787.5 million in a defamation settlement to Dominion Voting Systems for knowingly lying about the fraud in the 2020 election. Fox News is as hooked to Donald J. Trump as their favorite proverbial punching bag Hunter Biden was to crack cocaine when he was using. At some point, Donald J. Trump decided Mexico, and then later every country on the planet, was purposefully trying to undermine the United States by sending prisoners and mental patients across our southern border. What makes Trump's deep-seated fear and hatred of immigrants even more puzzling is the fact that not only did he marry 2 immigrants, his mother emigrated from Scotland. 4 of his 5 children also have an immigrant mother. The network has established a pattern of repeating and promoting everything that Trump says. Fox probably won't face a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit, as poor migrants are unlikely to combine forces to sue the network. While Fox was promoting nonsense about secret wars, the network largely ignored the Israel-Hamas war, the war in Ukraine, and various other conflicts around the world. Now, legally, it would be impossible to do this because that's not how defamation works, but I do think it would be hilarious for millions of migrants to get like a plaintiff's attorney and like sue in a class action lawsuit for the damage to the reputation because Trump repeatedly called them prisoners and mental patients. I think it'd be hilarious. I mean, you can't do that. It's not how defamation works at all. But the concept is funny. You know, just like, hello, Your Honor. Yes, I'm here on behalf of, how many was it last year? Are we going to guess? We're going to 4 million migrants who emigrated into the United States from these countries. And we believe, based on his statements, that Donald J. Trump has damaged their reputation. And here's our damages. Boom. And they like come up with like this crazy list of like every time somebody who was a migrant, somebody called them a mental patient or a prisoner. I think it'd be funny. I couldn't get a job because the president of the United States called me a mental patient. You know, just just a funny concept. It's not legally standing. Anyway, so Fox News, we're starting off with a sad one here, continues to exploit the death of Laken Riley. So on February 22nd, the body of a 22-year-old nursing student, Laken Riley, was found in a wooded area at the University of Georgia in Athens. Law enforcement quickly apprehended a suspect, Jose Antonio Ibarra, 26, that was later revealed to be an immigrant from Venezuela. Ibarra's exact immigration status remains unknown. Most right-wing media outlets pounced on the story as evidence that undocumented migrants were part of a wave of crime terrorizing most of the country. Several hosts on Fox News claimed without any supporting evidence that the Venezuelan government was releasing its prisoners so they could illegally immigrate to the United States. Former President Donald J. Trump coined the phrase migrant crime to describe what he called an invasion of military-aged men across the southern border. The biggest problem with these stories is that the rates of violent crime have dropped. No one has produced any credible evidence of a policy to release foreign prisoners inside the United States, and studies have shown that migrants commit fewer crimes than native-born Americans. None of that mattered to Fox News. They had a horrific story about a young woman randomly killed by a Venezuelan immigrant, and they were going to milk it for all it was worth. On Thursday on Jesse Watters' Primetime, the Fox News host employed a propaganda technique of using the actions of an individual to smear an entire nationality. Watters started the segment reading a headline from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Not fair. After UGA killing Venezuelans in Georgia, worry about backlash. Oh my gosh, the poor illegal immigrant Venezuelans who broke into the country are worried? Well, the Venezuelans should be worrying about the backlash. The media is worrying about illegal aliens worrying instead of worrying about how to stop Venezuelans from killing us. How about they worry about that?
So what happened there was just really stomach churning, what he said there, because that's a classic. That's like propaganda 101. One person does something wrong, therefore everyone in the group is guilty. And then he actually mocks the fact that other people from Venezuela might be worried that they'll be targets of violence because one person was a murderer. And if you look at stats, you don't want to go down that road, because you're basically saying, like, most white women are killed by people they know, and that would probably statistically be a white male. So you're basically saying that all white males are guilty of killing white women. This just gets crazy, because according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, most female murder victims know their attacker. The percentage of women murdered by an intimate partner is 5 times higher than male murder victims. Overall, 76% of female murders and 56% of male murders were perpetuated by someone known to the victim. So what happened to Laken Riley? Horribly tragic, absolutely disturbing. I understand why people would be concerned. Soul-crushing for her family. Terrifying for the community, 100%. I'm not downplaying that at all. But it is unusual. Usually it's somebody that knew her. It would be an ex-boyfriend, somebody who was obsessed with her, somebody she's currently dating, somebody who knew her from class, all of those scenarios. Because even when you take intimate partner out, the next top category for a person who's probably going to murder a woman is like coworker, neighbor, relative. So, it also makes common sense why the crime rate is lower among immigrants. If you come to a new country, especially if you're undocumented, and you know that you could be sent back to a place that might be quite dangerous to you, depending on your situation, you're probably not going to commit crime, because you don't want to get caught. You don't want to get arrested, put into the system. You don't want to draw any attention to yourself. You're living in fear probably every day that, the next person who comes up to you and, accosts you out of nowhere might ask to see some documentation of your immigration status, your papers, please, type situation. Laken Riley's story was the number 2 topic on Fox News last week. And again, it is a horrific tragedy. Absolutely horrific tragedy for her family, her friends, everyone who knew her, for her, of course. But this idea that it should be the number 2 topic on a news network is a little absurd. It's just Fox sees blood in the water and they say, that's it, we're going to run with this. It's macabre, it's sad, and I don't know what it does to her family. I always question that when they turn these, they have like a white woman goes missing somewhere and they'll turn it into, like, if she's pretty and she's blonde, they'll turn it into like a year's worth of segments where they talk about the murder, they talk about the death, even when the murder has been found or whatever, they just milk it. And it's awful. And then meanwhile, if that same woman was Black or Latina or Asian, it's not going to get the coverage. And I always wonder, like, does it help the family to turn this into a cottage industry where every day they turn on the television set and there's another article, another story about their past loved one? I have a little bit of personal experience in this, in that my great-grandfather was a fireman in St. Louis, and he was killed in the line of duty when he was 58 years old, near retirement. I don't even know if they let firemen work to 58 anymore, but this was back in the day. And he was on a fire truck that got struck by a truck that blew through an intersection while their sirens were on. And he killed all 4 men, because back in the day, fire trucks were not very big and they didn't have any protection for the firemen. I've seen a photo of what happened to the truck when it got hit. It was absolutely totaled. And he was thrown from the back of it, and all 4 men were killed. And I mention this because his photo and the fallen other 3 men were promoted in the press a lot at the time, because they wanted to send the message of please, at the time, please pay attention to sirens, stop. If you hear sirens, stop your car, pull over, don't risk it. You could kill 4 firemen. So I mention this because I know in my grandmother's home, when we'd go to visit, there was pictures of her father framed on the wall and in uniform and the whole 9 yards. And it was like seen as a source of pride, but it was also a source of great pain. He'd had another journey where he'd overcome addiction, and he turned his life around, and then he was killed tragically in this accident. So it was very, I think it messed up my mother because she still hates cars, hates driving, talks about cars as if they're death traps. And it's because she was a little girl when this happened. And she, it just is, I don't know. I always worry about the families when Fox News or any other cable news channel decides that somebody's death is a cash cow, and they run it for all it's worth. And they have specials and, full hour investigations into somebody who was abducted, or it's usually a white woman, usually a young white woman. And I just cringe a little bit. It hurts me because I'm just like, is this doing any good for anybody? I don't, you're making money, but I don't. Anyway, another sick detail, and then we'll move on to the next media clip, is one thing that really enraged me is that Fox was getting angry at other media companies. The AP and USA Today had an article that talked about how what happened to Laken Riley was an example for young women or women in general, and steps that they could take to be safer when jogging, and to always be aware that this could happen to you when you're out running. And to me, that's actually a very, very good thing, to try to use this tragedy to help other people prevent another tragedy. And that outraged the folks at Fox, which I was like, completely backwards. They just want to demonize immigrants. I was like, no, it's actually very important for especially a very young woman to know that this could happen, and this is what you should do if you can. I mean, you can't 100% protect yourself. It's never the victim's fault in a situation like this, but knowing steps to take ahead of time can definitely help. So anyway, moving on to Donald J. Trump calls the border crisis a military invasion. So on Thursday, former President Donald J. Trump visited Eagle Pass, Texas, to view the border and make speeches about his plans to fix the border crisis. Later that day on The Five, a Fox News producer cut up excerpts from Trump's speech that were featured in a segment about the visit. As Trump stood behind a lectern near the southern border, flanked by Border Patrol agents, local law enforcement, and Texas Governor Greg Abbott, he made several hyperbolic statements about the illegal border crossings.
This is a Biden invasion. Now the United States is being overrun by the Biden migrant crime. It's a new form of vicious violation to our country. It's migrant crime. Joe Biden will never say Laken Riley's name, but we will say it, and we will remember it. We're not going to forget her. And I'll say this, it's a military operation. I mean, we have this is like a war.
So Donald Trump said her name. I don't believe Joe Biden said Laken Riley's name, but the way he's making this into a military invasion really hits home with a lot of people and should be effective.
So Jesse Waters right there is just sort of summing it up. He's not saying this will help anybody. He's just saying this is effective propaganda to basically falsely call these people an invading army that's effective for Republicans. Basically, he just called it right out. Now that is from The Five. Later that night on Jesse Waters' primetime, he upped it just a little bit more.
Protect the homeland from an illegal alien invasion. Donald Trump says Biden doesn't know it, but we're at war. Now the president's allowing a cartel-run Trojan horse military campaign into the heart of the homeland, and he's blaming Trump for it.
So what Jesse Waters did, or his writers did, I suspect, is he took the seed of this is an invasion, this is a war, and he turned it into a cartel-run Trojan horse military campaign. That's his exact cartel-run Trojan horse military campaign, are his exact words. So, of course, he has nothing to back up what he just said. Who were these specific cartels that had organized thousands of migrants to pretend they were passing over the border as individuals when they were really a secret military force? I love to sit across from Waters and ask him the following questions. Is it one cartel or several who've agreed to work together to take down the United States government? Are these secret sleeper cells planning to battle various National Guard units? Do they have the kind of weaponry needed to battle the largest, strongest, and best financed military in the world? What's the objective of this war? Are 22-year-old nursing students a specific target in this war? How is migrant crime any different than crime? If migrant crime is any crime committed by migrants, would white male crime be any crime committed by white males? I'd love to force Waters to explain every single aspect of this so-called war. So next up, we have Jessica Tarloff explaining. Steve Doocy has also done this on the network, but they're only the only two examples I've seen of somebody pointing this out. She's pointing out that immigration is not the number one issue for Democrats. They completely forget this on Fox. They just say Americans' number one issue is immigration. Americans' number one issue is immigration. And I'm raising my hand going, Republican primary voters. Republican primary voters. According to your own research, Fox, Republican primary voters. So that's who immigration is the number one issue. So here's Jessica Tarloff. This is the same day from the 5.
Jesse's right that there are a bunch of people for whom immigration is their number one issue, but they all identify as Republicans. The latest Quinnipiac poll, for instance, has the number one issue for Democrats as preserving democracy, something that Joe Biden talks about a lot and obviously has a great case against Donald Trump
when
for.
When they talk about Americans, in the latest Gallup poll, all Americans identify immigration.
Did you look
as
at the breakdown
issue.
of who?
No. I'm talking about Americans, Jessica.
Oh, we're not red and blue?
No, there's some Democrats that also care about immigration.
Yes, but ranking it as the number one issue and saying this is going to define the election has failed for Republicans repeatedly. 2018, the caravan
2016, Trump won on immigration.
I'm talking about 2018 and 2020 when we had these caravans, right? You remember? And then, right, they stopped because also it was an illusion that we were having a mass invasion and people didn't like that kind of language.
I love the way she said that. It's like in your mind, which is true. And I actually, even though this is not the time of year traditionally for scary migrant caravans to appear on Fox News, it usually happens later, is like in the summer, later part of the summer. But why not? I mean, just make it up. That's what they've done before. Just, oh, look, it's migrants coming to the United States. It's a caravan. They've showed them on a train. They've shown them on foot. It's just, as again, caravan implying that they call them caravans, but this idea that it's this, because they do it every year, actually, but it's this idea that we're being invaded by, again, this organization, that there's somehow a plot here when it's not. It's just a bunch of disparate people who are desperate who come to the United States for various reasons. So I'm about to move on to new topics. So before I do, I'd like to give a shout out to my sponsor, who are the listeners of this podcast and readers of my newsletter. I am 100% supported from everyday people who spend $5 a month if they're a paid subscriber at Substack and various amounts over at Patreon. All paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content, and that varies from week to week what that is. It will probably be this week. It'll be the written version of whatever I'm writing for Super Tuesday, which is today. So I'm already behind schedule. Yay, let's go. I'm making fun of myself. If you cannot afford to be a paid subscriber, you can share the podcast, share the newsletter with friends. That helps tremendously. Give me a good review on whatever platform you listen to. That's also tremendously helpful. And I want to give a shout out because somebody was so kind and bought the ring light replacement that Thor has trashed. He's trashed 2 ring lights because he knocks them over. The first one was on a tripod. That one was toast. I replaced the tripod. He still kept breaking it. Broke it. Like, wouldn't work. Completely broke. The second one, I got like this heavy stand thinking this will do it. Nope. He knocked that over and it still works, but I can't adjust it at all, which is terrible for a light. So it's like, eh. And then I went online and found one that has a clamp that I'm going to clamp to the desk that's meant to do like an overhead shot or like if you're writing something or working on something on a table, but you can adjust it. I don't care about any of the adjustments. I just want something that he cannot knock over and break. Anyway, I live in a tiny apartment, so I've got no storage. So it's like I got to have it clamped to my desk. So I want to give a shout out to a Susan with 2 last names, and my legal name is 2 last names. So tip of the hat. Thank you so much. That's so kind of you. I always use first names only because of privacy reasons, but that is incredibly kind. I always save these from Amazon. I also want to give a shout out because somebody sent me coffee and Amazon did not include a gift receipt, so I have no idea who did that. It was just one of them, just one bag of coffee. It's just got it plain. I looked and looked and looked, nothing. No receipt of any kind. It was an Amazon thing, so I was just like, sorry, whoever did that. My apologies. I have no idea who you are, but I thank you. Thank you so much. So moving on, we move on to there'll be riots in the streets over Fani Willis. Now this one, I was backed up, so I didn't clip it. I didn't put it. I think Justin did over at the Daily Beast, and I died laughing. I was like, they are out of their freaking minds. They're out of their freaking minds. So briefly to explain the Fani Willis story, if you don't know the Fani Willis story, so when Fox wasn't pushing paranoia about the border crisis, it was desperately trying to make an investigation into Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis the scandal of the century. After a months-long investigation into possible election interference in the 2020 presidential election in Georgia, a grand jury, underline that, grand jury, recommended criminal charges against Trump and 18 other co-defendants. Willis is leading the prosecution against Trump and his associates in a RICO case. In January, Michael Roman, a former Trump campaign official, made accusations that Willis hired a lawyer, Nathan J. Wade, to work on the case that she was romantically involved with. He also accused Willis of benefiting financially from the employment of Wade as the two went on trips together as a couple. Willis and Wade acknowledged that they had a personal relationship, but that it started after he was hired. Willis has also testified that she reimbursed Wade for her half of the travel expenses with cash. After both sides submitted evidence and testimony, it's now up to a judge to decide whether to disqualify Willis from the case against Trump. Fox News has reveled in the drama surrounding Willis. On Friday, Katie Pavlich, a Fox News host sitting in on The Five, made a ridiculous prediction.
And the pressure on the judge. So he is appointed by the governor, Brian Kemp, and he has to get reelected. And he's in Fulton County, where Fani Willis is very popular. And given the way the left explodes and riots against decisions they don't like, there's a lot of pressure for him to keep her on the bench.
Are you saying that the good people of Fulton County would riot?
I'm not saying. I'm just saying there
that is
could
a
be
high
some
bar.
consequences.
Even for the people of Fulton County, that is a high bar.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be seeing January 6th for Fani.
Or maybe summer 2020.
All
Better
right.
example.
Well, let's everybody stay calm in Fulton County.
Dang.
Except Nathan Wade, you go.
Dang.
The dust settling on those dueling border visits. Donald Trump slamming.
I mean, you've got to be absolutely kidding me. You're saying that Fani Willis getting removed from this case, the case would still exist, most likely. We just moved to a new DA, new lawyer. So you're saying Fani Willis being removed from this case would be the equivalent of a black male being killed on camera by a cop who looks directly into the camera and kind of smirks as like, yes, I'm killing this man, which was what George Floyd was. So give me a break. You cannot compare the two. And you're basically just saying, Miss Pavlich, that black people riot. You didn't say it out loud, but that's implied here. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I cannot believe they're this ridiculous, but of course they are. I will give her co-host some credit because even they thought it was ridiculous. Even Jesse Waters thought this was ridiculous. If Gutfeld was on the show that day, who knows? He may have agreed. I could see him agreeing. I don't know. I can't see inside his head. I can't predict. I'm just guessing. It was Tyrus, who is black. So Tyrus was like, he just kind of made a noise there. But it was just like, they were all like, are you kidding? Are you out of your mind? And next we have a clutch your pearls moment. And what's a clutch your pearls moment? A clutch your pearls moment is when someone on Fox News gets deeply, deeply upset about something that they do every single day, that they do on a regular basis. But when somebody else does it, it's like, oh my goodness, I cannot control myself. Somebody better get the smelling salts because I'm about to have some of the vapors. The vapors. I need to have a little swig of brandy to calm my racing heart, and maybe touch some Chantilly lace to know that I'm a good Southern woman in a good God-fearing place and that everything will be okay. Okay, so this was Sandra Smith calling out other media companies for their lack of journalistic integrity. On Fox News.
Just looking at the New York Times, I was talking to Larry Kudlow about a piece that they did today. Trump's got no plan on inflation. Every single day we look at the New York Times and we wonder the bias from which that particular writer is coming from. There's a quote in front of me that automatically says this person's not being a journalist. They started from a place of party politics, assessing how a particular story could affect the election. That's not journalism. So immediately that removes you from the equation of being a journalist. I will defer my time.
I would love to go, hey, Sandra Smith. Sandra, can we chat? Hey, New York Times, they're not perfect. They make mistakes. Every media company makes mistakes. The news moves. It's the speed of light. Sometimes you make a wrong call. Sometimes you go too far, whatever. It happens. I've made mistakes. It happens. It's normal. It's part of the process. How many times has the New York Times paid, $787.5 million to a voting system companies because they knowingly lied about the 2020 election? Did that happen? Oh, that's Fox. I'm sorry, that's Fox. Fox is so ridiculously biased that during the midterms, on more than one occasions, they flat out said we when referring to the Republican Party. Last year, over 94% of the elected officials who appeared on the network were Republicans. 94%. 94%. That's specifically elected officials, but that is how obnoxiously biased this network is. They don't even try to hide it. And they're legit news programs. They have them. Sandra Smith would be a part of it. Ed would be Neil Cavuto, Brett Baer, Martha McCallum. But there's too much of the opinion pushed on Fox, and even the legit shows show bias, in my humble opinion, towards the Republic. Neil Cavuto is probably, out of everybody I've seen on Fox, in my opinion, the only person that attempts to really do legit journalism. Brett Baer is second, as are some of the correspondents, but it's just not enough. You can't do that and then have Jesse Waters say, oh, it's a war. They're emptying their prisons and making up a bunch of nonsense about various things, which is what he does, and then call yourself legitimate news. Moving on to, I hope Ruby Freeman's lawyer watches Fox News. So very briefly, in December, a jury awarded two former Georgia state election workers, Ruby Freeman and her daughter, Wandrea Shea Moss, just over $148 million in compensatory and punitive damages from Rudy Giuliani in a defamation suit. According to the lawsuit, Giuliani repeatedly lied about Freeman and her daughter, falsely accusing them of committing election fraud. Giuliani used a heavily edited video clip that he claimed showed Freeman and Moss exchanging a USB drive and pulling out what he claimed was a suitcase full of illegal ballots during the ballot counting process of the 2020 presidential campaign in Georgia. None of that was true. It was not a USB drive. It was not a suitcase full of illegal ballots. Everything they did was above board and legal and not controversial at all. What basically happened is he got a hold of some surveillance video and they tried to turn it into a story that wasn't there, and caused Ruby Freeman and her daughter incredible damage as they got harassed. Somebody showed up to Moss's grandmother's home, her actual home in Georgia, to make a quote-unquote citizen's arrest. They were harassed within an inch of their life because even, former President Trump was running around repeating these lies. And so on Wednesday, Laura Trump, the daughter-in-law of Donald J. Trump, appeared on Jesse Waters' Primetime and said the following. And there's one phrase in this that would get her in a lot of trouble if she kept elaborating.
if I am elected co-chair of the RNC, I can promise you we are laser focused on all of these things. We have to play this game better than the Democrats. We know their tricks. We know how they operate. We know they don't play things on the up and up. We will play everything legally, of course, but we have to do things like make sure that people get out and start early voting. We have to do things like legal ballot harvesting all across this country. We have to ensure that on Election Day, we have so many votes banked for Donald Trump that it doesn't matter how many 3 a.m. dumps they have or suitcases full of ballots, Donald Trump will be victorious.
Music to our ears, Lara.
So what Lara, people pronounce her name differently. Trump, it's Lara. Trump said just there would not amount to defamation, but she's right on the edge of it because the reference of suitcase full of ballots specifically goes right back to these two women. Because when you sit there and you repeat that lie over and over and over again on media, social media, Rudy Giuliani went on about this for months, and they were being harassed the entire time. So Miss Trump should be smarter to not use that reference, because had she said just a few more words, she's dancing into Ruby Freeman's lawyer contacting her and hitting her with a lawsuit, because you just can't do that. You can't make stuff up about, especially private citizens, because in this case, Ruby Freeman and her daughter were private citizens. So they're not written about in the press. No one knows anything about them. So it's much easier for them to win. Defamation suits are difficult to win. But in this case, it was so overwhelming. And, Giuliani did file for bankruptcy, so I have no idea how much money they're going to actually get out of him. But I just was so excited that they won that, because it was ridiculous. You can't just pick on private citizens, abuse them, target them, make them into villains, have, thousands of Trump supporters contact them and threaten their lives and scream at them and show up at their families' homes and then get away with it. No, you can't. Anyway, next up, I have two more. One's a bonus. It does not appear in the newsletter that I have to include. So one might go a little bit over, but Jesse Waters, this is the next one, continues to be the biggest creep on Fox News. So on Friday, this is a very short clip. I think this is the only reason why I got this one. Sometimes I get a clip that nobody else gets, which is rare because there's other accounts that follow Fox. But this one, Jesse Waters, they showed this clip of a rescue where a tractor trailer was involved in an accident. Like another truck hit it, and the tractor trailer was dangling precariously off a bridge. And this woman driver was, I only mention her gender because it comes up, was in the cab of this tractor trailer, like just basically, but for gravity, any minute she could fall and die. A fireman who was 29 years old, his name was Bryce Carden, descended, rappelled down on a cable from the bridge to, it's just an amazing rescue with this harness on. Took 40 minutes to get her out of the truck and back up to safety. He had to move very slowly, very carefully, but he saved her. And this was Jesse Waters' comment. This happened in Louisville, Kentucky, by the way. This is how Jesse Waters reacted to this.
So it was a female driver? Is that what happened?
I know.
I'm not saying
You're just asking facts.
Driver. I'm just asking because I want to know from the females at the table.
Who are no
when
longer
the female
talking to you.
driver was rescued by that heroic, strapping young man, do you think she has feelings for him now?
What did you say?
You heard me.
Romantic
That's the worst question I've ever heard in my life.
Do you think if you're dangling and this man has you like this around and he's saving your life, do you think you might develop feelings?
I think you'd be grateful, yes.
The producers are actually trying to save your job, so I've got to move on. Up next, who in their right mind works out at 4 a.m?
So what on earth is wrong with Jesse Waters? The guy's got some weird rescue complex. Because remember, April 2022, I'm the person who caught it. He made a reference that he putting joking in quotes, let the air out of the tires of his then intern's car. So she would be like, oh no, I can't get home. Who could give me a ride? Could it be the star of the show that I work on, Jesse Waters? Jesse Waters was a married man with 2 little girls at the time. Yes, and he joked about that on The Five. I clipped it. It went viral. It's the first viral thing I ever clipped. Okay, now he's making this reference about a woman falling in love with a man. He doesn't know anything about this woman. He doesn't know anything about the man. The woman might be married with kids. She could be a lesbian. She could be, have zero interest in men for whatever reason. Just, what are you talking? She could be like 45 and this guy's 28. That alone would probably be like, thanks. She's not going to be romantically in love with this dude. And like, you're diminishing what the guy did. This is his job. It's not about, I got to go save the damsel in distress. This is his job. This is what he does, and he did it brilliantly. Why are you talking about this as if it's a romance scandal? Now, the last one, again, not on the newsletter, but I had to include it. You'll understand why. I edited this one. I cut this up because I did this partly for this podcast. I had so much fun making this. Now, this is Donald J. Trump. This is Donald J. Trump at Eagle Pass being interviewed by Sean Hannity. This is a brief clip. Ron Flapowski of Midas Touch made this joke first, and I said, you know what that joke needs? That joke needs a media clip. Now, the context here is Donald J. Trump is talking about the state of Arizona. You can probably tell where this is going.
You have a governor, a very liberal governor, that a lot of people say shouldn't be the governor.
Arizona, how are you tonight?
The way we get it changed is we get the real governor, the duly elected governor, myself in there to work with lawmakers to change our laws, put some teeth into the laws. And frankly, we need to recall every one of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors.
She is now referring to herself as the, quote, duly elected governor of the state of Arizona.
I love you, Arizona. I love you, Arizona.
So I'll explain that clip a little bit. So basically what Hannity says is he mentions Arizona and he says, oh, that liberal governor who a lot of people say shouldn't be the governor. Ron Flapowski took that clip and said, yeah, one person thinks that the governor of Arizona shouldn't be the governor. And I was like, well, opportunity, here we go. And I was like, let's find some Kari Lake clips. The clip you heard in the middle of her going, hello, Arizona! And then saying she was the duly elected governor of Arizona. Kari Lake made that comment 2 months after the election. 2 solid months. It was like early January. She said she was the duly elected governor of Arizona. Not nutty at all, lady. That's not nutty at all. And even he called her out, like, are you, what? Duly elected? And then I had fun going through some of her old clips because I was trying to find a clip of her actually saying, like, I am the governor. And I couldn't, but I did find that duly elected. It was an audio clip that he played. And she must have said that in a podcast or an interview on radio. She said, I am the duly elected governor. And I said, oh, my goodness. But yeah, I wanted to find one of her going, I am the governor. I forgot how much she says, like, I love you, Arizona. I love you, Arizona. So that might be part of my new Kari Lake impression. But yeah, woo, lady, bring it down. Very quickly, before we move on to the last section, I'll just do a quick, I'm Judge Janine. And if you haven't become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, I ask you why. It's $5 a month. That's nothing. At the end of the day, you pay a lot more for Sure, you get a lot more with HBO, but, if you want to keep 2 cats eating and a crazy lady yelling at a microphone in her tiny apartment, become a sponsor to Decoding Fox News. You won't regret it, or maybe you will. Okay, that's my there's a delivery person in my hall. He's probably hearing me scream, probably wondering, why is a person screaming from this apartment? And she sounds like Judge Janine. Is Judge Janine in that apartment? Anyway, the next section is stories Fox News ignored. Every week, I compare the hours I've watched on Fox News to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. The following list are stories PBS covered that Fox News did not. So here we go. Updates in the Israel-Hamas war. There's quite a few of them. Fox has gone back to ignoring the conflict for the most part. They were mentioning the ceasefire a little bit, the negotiations with that, but that's about all they talked about. So here we go. PBS produced a segment that included the video diary of Sam Sank, an IDF soldier who filmed himself during his deployment. Special correspondent Malcolm Brabant interviewed Sank in his family's home in London. Now, this segment was not an endorsement of the IDF or the actions of the Israeli government. I think they just wanted to show that side of it, and they were pretty much, there's some pushback about various things about the war. It was interesting. If you wanted to see that, it's on YouTube. In northern Gaza, Palestinians gathered to receive much needed food and humanitarian aid when IDF soldiers fired into the crowd. More than 100 people were killed and 700 injured in the chaos that followed. The Palestinians say that most of the victims were shot, while the Israeli government has claimed that they were accidentally trampled and that their troops only fired when they felt endangered by the crowd. That's a very controversial story. Fox did mention it very, very briefly, but hardly at all. So that's why it went ahead and included it in this list. The families of Israeli hostages staged a 4-day march from southern Israel to Jerusalem. As the families got closer to the capital, thousands of Israelis joined them, demanding the release of hostages held in Gaza. Many families of the hostages have expressed their anger and disgust that Netanyahu has not done enough to secure the safety of the hostages or negotiate for their release. A leader of Hamas said they are considering a ceasefire, but are also willing to keep fighting. The president of Egypt has said that an agreement could be reached within days. Hamas claimed that 7 more hostages were killed due to Israeli airstrikes and military operations in Gaza, bringing the total number of hostages killed by Israeli military to 70. 3 of the men Hamas claimed were killed were aged 79, 80, and 85. They were all taken hostage on October 7th. After being delayed due to the Israel-Hamas war, Israel held some local elections. Ultra-Orthodox and far-right parties saw gains, although voter turnout was low in most areas. Aaron Bushnell, a 25-year-old active duty member of the U.S. Air Force, set himself on fire outside the Israeli embassy to protest U.S. policy in the Israel-Hamas war. He filmed his act of protest and posted it to the streaming platform Twitch. The social media platform has since removed the footage. Before he doused himself in accelerant, he said, "I will no longer be complicit in genocide." As the flames consumed him, he shouted, "Free Palestine." Law enforcement officers attempted to save his life. He later died of his injuries. I wanted to add a quick note about the death of Bushnell. I've seen some criticize the media for not giving the story more focus. For decades, most media companies have chosen to downplay suicides to avoid copycat events. I've included a link to the American Psychological Association that explores this topic in detail. I feel very strongly about this, which is why I included the link. I also want to add that the way PBS handled the story is they basically read it just like I did. They did not include images. They did not include images of Bushnell himself. And they just sort of acknowledged it and moved on, which the reason why they do that is not because of a political agenda. It's because of copycat events that have happened before when suicides are overly hyped in the media. And it explores it at length. This has been going on for decades. The article that I included is from 2003. So I feel very, very strongly about how the press handles situations like this. So if you want to learn more, check out what the APA wrote about it. So moving on, updates in the Ukraine war. During an annual speech to the nation, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the West could risk nuclear war by directly helping Ukraine. Putin alluded to comments made by President Emmanuel Macron of France that NATO countries might send troops to help Ukraine. Ukraine's military said that it had retreated from 2 more villages outside the eastern city of Avdiivka, which was captured earlier this month by Russian forces. In Russia, a human rights campaigner, Oleg Orlov, the co-chair of the Nobel Peace Prize-winning organization Memorial, was found guilty of repeatedly discrediting the Russian armed forces. After the judge named his crime, she sentenced Orlov to prison for 2.5 years. Orlov remained defiant throughout the trial. He sat in court reading a copy of The Trial, Franz Kafka's classic on the absurdity of life and injustice. Hungary's parliament ratified Sweden's accession to NATO, bringing the country one step closer to NATO membership. The vote comes 600 days after Sweden decided to join the alliance after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Biden administration plans to block a merger between supermarket giants Kroger and Albertsons, citing the combined company would hurt competition and raise prices for consumers. Xolair, a brand name for an asthma drug, received FDA approval for severe food allergies. The medication has been available for asthma patients since 2003. The first U.S. spacecraft to land on the moon, launched by a private company, landed on its side and went dark, as its solar panels are not at the right angle to receive sunlight. The lander might be positioned correctly in the next 2 or 3 weeks to receive sunlight. 2 men were convicted in the murder of Jam Master Jay. Over 20 years ago, Run DMC star Jam Master Jay was gunned down in his recording studio. An anonymous Brooklyn federal jury found Carl Jordan Jr. and Ronald Washington guilty of killing Jay in 2002 over what prosecutors characterized as a drug deal gone wrong. City supervisors in San Francisco apologized to African Americans and their descendants for decades of past racist policies. The vote was unanimous, with all 11 board members signed on as sponsors of the resolution. The Supreme Court will hear a case involving the legality of bump stocks in semi-automatic weapons. Bump stocks can make a firearm operate more like an automatic weapon or machine gun. A bump stock was used in the 2017 mass shooting at a music festival in Las Vegas. PBS produced a segment as part of its America at a Crossroads series that explored how governors were trying to disagree better during this time of intense political polarization. President Biden issued an executive order intended to safeguard the personal data of American citizens from China, Russia, and other hostile countries. The White House is leading an investigation into the national security risks of smart cars made in China that could gather sensitive information about the Americans driving them. In Haiti, 4 police officers were killed due to gang violence as the country continues its descent into lawlessness. The prime minister was in Kenya trying to get help with policing via the UN. A Colorado paramedic, Peter Kinuchek, 51, was sentenced to 5 years in prison for the death of Elijah McClain. In 2019, a 23-year-old black man was stopped by police after a 911 call of a suspicious person. McClain was aggressively restrained and placed in a corduroy chokehold. Paramedics then injected him with an overdose of the powerful sedative ketamine. McClain died in a hospital days later. He had committed no crime and had no criminal record. CVS and Walgreens will start selling abortion medication in states where abortion is still legal. Access to the drug will require a prescription. PBS produced a segment about Muhammad Yunus, an economist and advocate for the poor in Bangladesh. He was a pioneer in microlending to help lift women out of poverty. Yunus has received the Nobel Peace Prize, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and the Congressional Medal of Honor. Yunus ran afoul of the Prime Minister in Bangladesh and is now facing criminal corruption charges that he and his many supporters have said are politically motivated. Richard Lewis, comedian and actor, died of a heart attack at the age of 76. Lewis was best known for his self-deprecating dark humor. He made his stand-up debut in 1971. In addition to performing live in comedy shows, he worked in television, appearing in The Larry Sanders Show, 2.5 Men, and Everybody Hates Chris. Among his film work was the Mel Brooks spoof Robin Hood Men in Tights, Leaving Las Vegas, and the screwball comedy She's Funny That Way. His last role was as a version of himself on the long-running comedy show Curb Your Enthusiasm. So funny. So funny. It's such a loss. Richard Lewis is just I love that type of humor, too. Somebody who makes fun of themselves. That guy was so funny. Just shout out. Anyway, all of those stories, including the obituary there to Richard Lewis, were not included on Fox. All of them. Staggering amount. So we go to By the Numbers. Every week I compare the top 5 subjects on Fox News to the top 5 covered on the PBS NewsHour. We start with Fox. Number 1 topic, border crisis, 16%. Second topic, nursing student killed in University of Georgia. That's Laken Riley, 12%. 11% was just dedicated to bashing Joe Biden. 7% Hunter Biden. And 6% was the interview with Trump. PBS NewsHour, 10% was the Israel-Hamas war. 9% was Artist Profile, which is a regular segment. Arthur Profile, people promoting their books, 8%. Border crisis, 5%. Presidential primary, 5%. Words used on Fox News for the week, March 3rd, 2024. Biden, 551. Trump, 352. Border, 287. Crime, 153. Illegal, 153. Hunter, 147. Laken Riley, 63. China, 56. Immunity, 38. Nikki Haley, 32. Fani Willis, 22. Invasion or invade, 19. Israel, 8. George Floyd, oddly, 5. And AOC as in Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 3. George Floyd was mentioned 5 times because they kept bringing him up in relation to Laken Riley, which makes no sense because a man killed by cops is not the same thing as a tragic murder of a woman jogging, because it is different when a cop kills a citizen. It changes everything, because we want to trust the cops, not have the cops kill us. So yeah, that's why that was a much, much different scenario. And there's video of it. I mean, just I'm still haunted by the video of George Floyd being murdered. I remember seeing it for the first time and just being absolutely horrified. And I can immediately recall it. You say his name and I immediately see the look of that cop's face at looking directly into the camera. I think that's why it was so chilling. Anyway, that's it for the podcast. I'm exhausted. It's Super Tuesday. I'll be working all night. You can find more about Fox News at Threads. I'm on Twitter, formerly known as X. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook as Juliet Jeske. YouTube is Juliet Jeske. And TikTok, the application that I cannot stand because they keep shadow banning me. But thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to become a supporter of Fox News, you can go to Decoding Fox News, I should say. Go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, Patreon for Decoding Fox News. The podcast mascots, Odin and Thor, send their love. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you at the next podcast, which will probably be in the next 24 to 48 hours. Go Super Tuesday. Thank you so much.
Resolute Square.